Welcome, everyone, to the NAIOP Solutions Series. I'm Sheila Vertino, and I'll be your host for today's program. Our main goal for this program, as you know, those of you who are returning, is to provide you in a very short time period with some fresh insights, some practical tactics, positive strategies, help you succeed in today's rather tough business environment. As always, we also encourage you to drive the content for this program. So let us know what topics you'd like to hear in future programs, and also if you have someone you would recommend as a presenter, let us know that too. You can just send us an email, or you can add it on in the survey that you will receive after the program. I would like to thank Harvard Business School Real Estate Executive Education Programs for sponsoring today's program. These executive programs are designed to help seasoned and emerging leaders both protect their assets and manage complex projects. In addition, participants will gain the skills that they need to navigate global markets and capitalize on new opportunities. If you would like more information on the Harvard program, please visit their website at exed.hbs.edu. I'm having a little trouble with this first slide. I'll go ahead and Sandy will help me out here. As I mentioned, the Solution Series is great for the quick bursts of information, but some topics require more in-depth discussion, and for that we have 90-minute webinars. The next full webinar is with Chris Lee, and it's going to take place on Thursday, May 27th. I'm a huge fan of Christopher Lee's. He is just a man of incredible insight and a very positive person. So I absolutely guarantee that you will come away with some terrific information from him. His program is, as you can see on the screen, he's going to be identifying 12 indispensable strategies to help your business prosper in the challenging months and years ahead. And this program is not just for people who are owning the business. It's really applicable to anyone who is in the business. The cost is $65 for NAIOP members, $95 for non-members. If you'd like to register for this 90-minute webinar, you just go online to naiop.org/webinars. Okay, so we're about ready now to begin our program. With us today is Kurt Rosene and John Driscoll. Kurt is Senior Vice President of the Alter Group and oversees more than 5 million square feet of real estate in the southwestern United States. Kurt directs the build-to-suit and property development activities. In addition, he's responsible for coordinating real estate services for Fortune 500 corporate clients throughout the United States. Kurt is also a former president of NAIOP's Arizona chapter. And with him is John Driscoll. John is president of Alter+Care. His experience includes strategic business development, financing, and operational activities. He also serves as a regular judge for Modern Healthcare Magazine's Facilities Design Competition. Previously, John directed all healthcare-related real estate activities for Rush University Medical Center, and that included strategic facilities planning, capital budgeting, capital development projects, property management, and leasing. Welcome, Kurt and John, and thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Sheila, and thanks to all of you for this terrific opportunity. I'm going to start by providing a brief history on Alter and then talk about our transformation into healthcare and give you some insight as to that process. Then I'll pass the torch to John to speak more specifically about Alter+Care. Founded in Chicago in 1955 by William A. Alter, the Alter Group is a privately held, family-owned national real estate development firm. We continue to forge ahead in the current economic environment with a simple guiding principle, and that's to develop buildings using our own equity combined with sound long-term financing. It's unique in today's environment. For our 55-year history, the Alter Group has focused on the development of suburban office and industrial facilities to build a long-term portfolio of business parks. To our clients, we've stressed the value of dealing with an entrepreneurial company that has a very horizontal corporate structure, therefore making the decision timeline very short. We couple that with the fact that we are our own equity source, and we combine a quick deal-making process with a long-term portfolio perspective. Next slide, please. With any portfolio development model, the perfect balance of build-to-suit and speculative development follows both tenant demand and capital market appetite for leverage. We must always maintain this balance constantly to maintain the product in the pipeline of leasing activities, but also we consistently gauge future cash flow with debt service. As a portfolio developer, we have physically constructed a vertically integrated company that can provide development solutions basically from soup to nuts. We have in-house expertise that goes from acquiring fee simple land, planning, developing, building, leasing, and managing our facility assets at the end of construction. We specialize in multi-tenant and multi-use business parks, and we've committed ourselves to a very long-term hold perspective. Next slide, please. In preparing for this presentation, I began to think about where we were as an organization almost 15 years ago. At that time, we were just coming out of our last big real estate recession, a national recession in the early 90s. In many respects, this current recession has similar characteristics to those of the early 90s, and I think we all find ourselves looking at our current service lines and considering expansion into other lines of service to weather the storm. In the mid to late 90s, the Alter Group was affected by several market forces. First, there was the rise of the REITs, and they were having a dramatic effect on our industrial development. There was a flow and growing capital movement from Wall Street into real estate, and that really started to have an effect and reduce the returns and provided a competitive environment that we hadn't seen before, and it candidly kind of shut down temporarily our push into industrial development. At the same time, the recovering recession started to provide capital and an appetite for suburban office product, and the speculative development increased a lot in the mid to later 90s. We had been experiencing up until that point, from the early 90s through the mid-90s, a large volume of build-to-suit business for the office sector, and the increased participation of the capital markets, at least in the suburban office arena, began to reduce that volume of business. Therefore, we were left with an inward focus on how and where we could transform our service lines. Our main objectives were to increase our business output while maintaining our core business, and we hope to expand with minimum increases in overhead. We saw an enormous demand in the healthcare industry, and at the same time, we were hearing a lot of comments and being told by the capital markets that they liked the stability of healthcare as a long-term investment. Next slide, please. So at its inception, we at least realized the one important thing was that we really didn't have a clue what we were doing in the healthcare arena. We had several medical buildings that had been developed in the late 80s and early 90s in our hometown of Chicago, really through relationships. And although they were mildly successful, we felt that we quickly understood that we really hadn't had a lot of exposure to the healthcare industry, nor had we had a lot of exposure to the tenants. We made several important decisions to initialize our expanded services. First, we wanted to focus on hospital networks and develop on campuses. We wanted to attach ourselves and align ourselves as much as we could with the major healthcare providers. We determined we wanted to focus more on the operational process than the real estate. The only way to solve the operational side was to hire experienced professionals and grow within. We felt strongly that our portfolio development philosophy and our long-term hold perspective would marry very well with healthcare provider goals. Next slide, please. Some of the things that we learned during our transition to the healthcare industry, similarities of office development and healthcare development. But let me go first through maybe some of the differences that we felt. Most healthcare development is on hospital campuses, and therefore the hospitals control the land, and they prefer to lease the land rather than sell it fee simple, where up until this point, even though we had some experience with leased land, traditionally we bought fee simple land and developed business parks. On the healthcare side, one of the upsides was we were able to obtain pre-leasing before we had to start a medical facility. And at the time, traditionally, we were doing a bunch of spec development, so it was very nice to have some pre-leasing coming in. The medical development was really driven much more by the user. And, you know, we had come from an arena where on the office and industrial side, the brokers and the markets were really the drivers of what we built, the brokers representing tenants. So this was a user-driven deal versus kind of a market-driven deal. And then healthcare development has a tremendously longer lead time, and we were really kind of served up in our history of doing things with very quick transactions and always kind of being behind the 8 ball and moving swiftly. With that said, I think there's also some important similarities. Our in-house development capabilities, we had the soup to nuts that I mentioned before, so it really brought us a great platform to work with end users that wanted to be able to deal with one organization that could do everything. Our long-term ownership perspective aligned us very well with the end users' objectives, and kind of the slow and steady desire of doing transactions worked well with our long-term commitment. Finally, I think the ability to bring capital and take on speculative leasing risk was imperative. Next slide, please. So for the first step we took was to hire healthcare specialists that were very experienced in traditional real estate development, but more importantly, they had hands-on experience in dealing with hospital organizations and other healthcare end users. As mentioned before, we brought a portfolio developer's mentality, operations expertise, and a solution that offered capital and development capabilities. We maintained a very narrow focus of product and type of clients. And most importantly, we hired John Driscoll, our founder and president of Alter+Care. And with that said, I respectively hand the torch over to John Driscoll.
Well, thank you very much, Kurt. It was a very kind introduction. But more importantly, Sheila, thank you very much from NAIOP's perspective as well, too, to have the opportunity to talk a little bit about the creation and evolution of Alter+Care. As Kurt had mentioned, the Alter Group has had a long-term perspective since 1955, so we had a wonderful basis to start the company with regards to being family-owned by Bill Alter and now succeeded by his son Michael Alter. So it was important from our perspective, starting the company, to have a distinct voice and name that could be addressed directly to the healthcare profession itself. Although we do portray ourselves as an affiliate of the Alter Group, we do take advantage of the resources we have. We do have dedicated personnel within Alter+Care to service the healthcare community. As a result of the relationship with the Alter Group, we can provide private resources and expertise, as the slide says. Most importantly is we invest our own money. We're not a broker for institutional money or for REITs or other investors, but it's our money we invest at risk for the benefit of healthcare providers that we work with, as well as our own investment portfolio. The model that we were looking at, from our perspective, was really an ambulatory delivery model, and what we mean by that is really outpatient medical services. The difference there is really the source of financing versus inpatient, which would be a hospital. Most hospitals are owned or operated by not-for-profits here in the country, about 75%, and they can all access tax-exempt financing, which is far less expensive than traditional real estate-related financing. With an outpatient model, many of the spaces, if not all, are leased by physician practitioners that are affiliated with the hospital. So in an ambulatory model, the hospital in the past really acted just as a real estate owner and leasing space to physicians, and that's where our role stepped in as the investor instead for these ambulatory facilities. So if you can move to the next slide, please. Part of the reasons Kurt had mentioned earlier about the diversification from the Alter Group's perspective with the downturns in the economy in the 90s and the early 2000s as well but it was really to diversify the Alter family's portfolio. They were essentially in two product lines, which was office and industrial development. And with healthcare, we've been able to diversify the portfolio a little bit more, which now comprises about 15% of the overall Alter family portfolio. At the time when we started the company, which is back in 1997, it was perceived healthcare would be a recession-proof industry, and it would help a company like ours through the downturns of a commercial real estate development recession, which we saw in the early 90s and early 2000s, by sustaining ourselves with the healthcare product line. That has pretty much proven out to be the case until recently, which we'll talk a little bit more on a slide further in the conversation. The other piece of the puzzle as well, too, a translation of capabilities, that there's a lot of things that the Alter organization does. In particular, Kurt had mentioned the development expertise we have from planning and development and asset management and so forth, that could be translated to the healthcare arena. So it's a very comparable product in regards to the operations of creating the asset as well as maintaining it. There are some nuances with regards to healthcare versus a commercial tenant, but a lot of the pieces of the puzzle of execution of these developments are somewhat comparable. So there was a little bit of an ease of transition from the commercial and industrial environment the Alter Group was accustomed to move into the healthcare platform. Last but most importantly was capital availability. In my personal experience and others that work with us in the healthcare arena, there's always greater demand for capital than what's available. So from a healthcare provider's perspective, they have to make a decision on prioritization of how they spend their capital every year. And what we've seen is a growing increase of looking to other people's money, such as a company like ours, to invest in the ambulatory facilities that I mentioned earlier before. So the availability of capital in a reliable source of capital, which is the Alter family, is at our disposal, which has been very good. It is really not affected as much by the cyclical nature of the stock market or other investors. So it was very important from a capital standpoint as well, too, that the Alters could invest very easily into the healthcare arena as well. We can go to the next slide. So some of the challenges, I mean, we started the company, like I mentioned, in 1997. We literally made up the name the first week we were there, and we started talking to the healthcare providers, and it did help, obviously, with my background and others in the healthcare profession. But it's really a unique client base, and that was one of the challenges from a healthcare provider standpoint. Their world is life or death issues. They are dealing and treating with people on a daily basis for them to feel better, to be better, to cure them. And real estate is really not a priority from a healthcare provider standpoint, although they do need real estate in order to perform their services. So their mindset and their perspective on what they do and how our role as a company fits in with theirs is somewhat unique, and you have to be accustomed to that perspective in order to be successful in this business. The delivery model modifications, what we saw mostly, as Kurt mentioned before, is most of our transactions have been through a ground lease. It's been on-campus medical office development, and the purpose of the ground lease is, one, hospitals are reluctant to sell land since they have a very long-term perspective. Some hospitals have been in business for over 100 years on the campus which they're located. And number two, more importantly, through a ground lease, they can control the use of the facility. So if a company like ours were to develop a medical office building, we're restricted to lease space only to their physicians on their medical staff and not competing physicians, and there's other restrictions as well, too. So the delivery model that we employed with Alter+Care did vary from the Alter Group in the past, whereas Kurt mentioned that the Alter Group was more accustomed to buying property, developing business parks, owning fee simple land, and here we're in a little bit of a different situation through a ground lease transaction. Since that time, the Alter Group has now developed some properties through a ground lease transaction as well, too, so it's become more commonplace today than maybe it was 10, 15 years ago. Relationship versus transaction model, Kurt had mentioned that as well, too. Hospitals are very relationship-oriented. It's somewhat of a parochial industry where there has to be a lot of faith and trust and confidence in companies they do business with. Again, from their perspective, they're thinking of life and death issues, and they want to be sure that people that are associated with them have that perspective. So it does take some time to develop the relationship with a hospital provider as opposed to a transaction model from broker to broker, which is a more commonplace transaction you would see in the commercial sector. The challenges we had was just the ability to penetrate the market. It takes time. It took a number of years to develop the relationships and the confidence of the marketplace in Alter+Care. We were a new company in 1997. Now we've been around the block for 13 going on 14 years. But at the very beginning, it took some time for healthcare providers to understand who we are, the value we brought to them, and their confidence in us to deliver for their purposes. If we go to the next slide. So we talked a little bit about the perspective, and this may give others that are listening here today an order of magnitude with regards to our experience has been with regards to the development of the company and as it compared to maybe other things the Alter Group has done. But it took about 3 years for us to get to profitability. So at the very inception of the company itself, we were not involved in investments as much as fee-based services, and we developed some buildings such as on this slide called the Core Center in Chicago. So we were able to generate enough fee income in order to be profitable in year 3. The 3 to 5 year period is what we'll call the gestation period, which is really the relationship building period with healthcare providers for them to be comfortable that we could be a valued investor with their organization for an ambulatory facility. So it took probably up to almost 5 years to be actively investing in speculative development with on-campus medical office buildings. The next time period from there is 7 to 10 years, quite frankly. It takes that long from an initial conversation to an actual completion of a facility and meeting the objectives that the healthcare provider has established. In large part is deploying medical services and recruiting physicians at a given location. So from an initial conversation to planning to executing documents such as a ground lease to financing and building the building and then also leasing it to practitioners after the building is completed, you have to have a long-term perspective with an investment like this. It's rare that you will see in the healthcare community a build-to-suit transaction with 100% leased by a healthcare provider. It's really more of a multi-tenant model, and as a result then they're looking for a company like ours to take risk and to have the temperance and the time. As Kurt mentioned before, we have a long-term perspective from an investment ideal in any case, but nevertheless it does take time in order to complete these facilities and have them up and running, and it's the time period about 7 to 10 years. And then as we look as our company now, as I mentioned, we've been in business for 13 going on 14 years, that we start seeing a recurrence of business opportunities with providers we started talking to over a decade ago. So we look at almost a decade of involvement in the healthcare profession in order to be at the point where there are continued opportunities with people that we know in the industry as a result of being able to successfully perform in a given location with an investment. So the time perspective is long. It takes patience and temperance, but it has benefited us over the long term without question. Can we go to the next slide, please? So that's how our business model evolved from Alter Group into Alter+Care for the healthcare profession, and some of the nuances that we faced as we moved along, as well as some of the challenges we have ahead. And one of them that has been very obvious over the last 2 years with our financial difficulties we've had here in the United States and elsewhere in the world, as they call it the Great Recession, that it did have an impact this time in the healthcare profession, whereas earlier downturns in the early 2000s and the early 1990s, even early 1980s, did not have a significant impact on the healthcare profession, but this time it did. And some of the reasons why that are on the slide, which we can talk a little bit about. One is that there's a reduction in revenue from a healthcare provider standpoint because a lot of people decided not to have elective procedures, which meant that they had an option of getting a procedure done or not in the hospital. And as you know, with insurance, part of it you pay yourself, part of your insurer pays, and people decided that they would defer elective procedures. So it was a reduction in revenue from a healthcare provider standpoint. Number two, the bond market was significantly impacted by the Great Recession, so to speak, and it started really in 2007 and hit a peak in 2008 and 9, where interest rates spiked significantly for healthcare providers. And what that meant was that they had to reset their bonds to more fixed rates and lower rates in order to survive over the long term, and they spent an enormous amount of capital or cash in order to reset those loans. Third aspect what happened is that a lot of tremendous personal wealth was diluted during this time period, and a lot of that personal wealth is philanthropic support to healthcare providers, and they saw a significant dip in philanthropic support in the last couple of years as well too. And then number four is increased in charity care, that what's happened there was a rise in unemployment. There are still people that need medical services, and most of your hospitals are mission or faith-based, and they will accept patients regardless of the ability to pay. So all these different functions happen simultaneously at the same time, that the bottom line reduced the income of a healthcare provider and more significantly reduced the capital available to invest in any types of medical equipment or facilities as a result. So the healthcare profession over the last 18 months has really slowed down, is just now starting to pull out of that dip into 2010. So a significant difference this past time. Fortunately, during this time period, we had some investments in place beforehand and had some relationships started where we're going to have development start in 2010. So we're able to weather through this market, but it was very severe this time as opposed to in the early 90s or early 2000s. Can I have the next slide, please? Past, present, and future. We look back on it from the Alter organization standpoint. Alter+Care has been able to provide some diversification in the portfolio. As I mentioned before, we're about 15% of the overall portfolio, but it's worked out very well from that objective standpoint. Secondly, the long-term perspective for healthcare is stable. In particular, with healthcare reform being passed this last few months, it gives healthcare providers an essence of what direction the healthcare industry is going, and there's a little bit more predictability than perhaps it was 6 months to a year or so ago. So we think over the long term there's a good, stable perspective from our company standpoint to continue with our model. It still requires commitment from the Alter organization, which it has, and the resources available, particularly from a capital standpoint, but also development expertise. And I think that what's been beneficial to Alter+Care is the commingling with the Alter Group's development expertise and asset management and so forth. We've been able to sustain those different functions that we need in order to develop medical facilities that are still in place. Last, it is a long-term perspective in a business such as healthcare, and we put it's not for the faint of heart. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes commitment, it takes resources, it takes relationship building, it takes confidence in the marketplace and your business as well too. But if you're able to stay the course and keep focused on those objectives, that other companies should be able to translate over to the healthcare arena should they wish to do so. So it's been a very steady business for us. It's always a moving business, obviously because healthcare is such a predominant size of our national economy and importance to our citizens. But nevertheless, it's been a good business model for the Alter Group overall, and starting Alter+Care back in 1997 and moving forward. Thank you very much.
Kurt and John, I want to thank you both for such an excellent presentation. It was really terrific to hear your insights on reinventing Alter Group's product lines and creating your full-service healthcare arm. It certainly was equal parts commitment, perseverance, and patience. For those of you who are listening today and might want to hear the presentation again, it will be available at close of business today, and along with all of the past Solution Series programs. That's at the NAIOP corporate website, which is www.naiop.org. You just click on that large button on the front page that says Solution Series. Our next Solution Series program will be on May 19th, and we encourage you to watch your email for a message from NAIOP Corporate with more information about our topic and presenter. And remember, again, if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, just jot them down on the session evaluation survey you'll receive right after this program. Thank you again to our presenters, and thank you all for listening today. Goodbye for now.